You texted me. That was so nice. The day it happened.
I asked you to. Yeah,
very nice.
Great, yeah.
Ready?
Okay. Are we on? Tell us. Yeah, we're on.
All right.
We're on. Hello, edupreneurs and budding explorers.
Lifelong learners.
Lifelong learners, the whole thing. So we're here again this week to answer some of your questions, respond to some of the things that we've been seeing in your posts. So welcome. Glad to have you with us. So one of the things so let's just kind of go through them, all right?
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah,
let's do it.
One of the comments, I think, from one of the writers was about application, or how this process seems to be more natural in the early childhood movement, where we want kids to explore, we want them to take risks, etc. But then that as they move up in school, perhaps we begin to train it out of them. Maybe it's a natural ability that we have to relearn or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we talked about this, Paul, but it really starts, I think, in the parental behaviors. If you're asking the sorts of questions that allow young people to self-explore versus trying to define them, then I think that behavior itself will hopefully lead to a lifelong learning experience and a lifelong learning development process where the student, the young person, takes ownership for it, and then hopefully the formalized schooling process won't beat that out of them. I think one of the things we've talked about is that this transformation in the educational system has to start unleashing things in the young people and not just forced knowledge down their throats. And again, find personalized learning tools, find project-based opportunities so that kids are following their passions and energies and learning along the way.
Yeah. Well, I think the writer has a good point, though. I think there are
Absolutely.
many school systems that that are okay with kids exploring and risk-taking younger, but somehow when we get older, we have to get more responsible and more conservative and not take risks. And I think we're saying the opposite.
Well, and it's not unusual. I mean, the industrialized world has gone from one of mass production and mass industrialism to one of real personalization. I mean, look at how the internet's used. Look at how consumers get their goods now. It's very personalized. We need to make that same transformation in the educational system through the edupreneurs and through the educational leaders like yourself.
Yeah, good, great. We had some questions about entrepreneurialism in higher education.
Edupreneurism
in higher education, and how that can be accomplished even more, or how we can emphasize it more in higher ed. I don't think that's too big of a stretch at all. I mean, we do talk a lot about P12, or even into college really makes sense to me.
Well, I think the educators that we videotaped were almost exclusively from the P through 12, outside of yourself, from the P through 12 arena. But here's what I would say about that. I think that this is a lifelong deal, and that we can talk about Ps and 12s and hires, but to me it's that lifelong experience of doing some level of self-discovery, unleashing the things again that are inside of you, and then creating an external reality that's in alignment with it. And then I think everything else falls into place. So yeah, I do think it's higher education, but I think the individual is the owner of this training and this learning deal. It's not a P, it's not a 12, it's not a higher ed.
Yeah, no age limits either way.
No, in fact, there was just an article yesterday, I forget where I read it, about encore.org, where many people, some of whom had difficulty finding work during these difficult business times or economic times, and they repurposed themselves. They repurposed themselves into social areas, not-for-profits. You know, we're talking about repurposing, we're talking about retirement, we're talking about redefining oneself. That's something that should be going on when you're 3, when you're 10, when you're 30, when you're 50, when you're 80, when you're 100. And so as long as we're applying this thing, those delineations between higher ed, secondary education, and P through 12 will hopefully become increasingly transparent.
Good. I enjoyed reading this week, and I responded to many of you in this topic of, several of you said, look, we really like this concept of economic unit of one, but it sounds a little anti-groupish, or it doesn't really take into account larger community issues. And while I certainly, I think both of us understand what the point you're bringing up. Boy, in our minds, nothing can be further from the truth. But so for me, the only way that you can give to a community, the only way that you can be part of a larger system, is if you develop yourself to the maximum. You don't, and you're not doing that with the goal of isolating yourself. In fact, quite the contrary. You're developing yourself. So one of my purposes in life, if I were sharing my mission statement with you, would be, I want to develop myself so I can give to others. And so I don't think the concepts are exclusive in any way. And it's good we can talk about that.
Well, we had spirited discussions at the beginning of the development of this course about whether we should be changing the name of this from Economic Unit of One. I think you might have suggested Personal Unit of One.
That's right.
And
Mr. Psychology.
And to me, which is fine, but we wanted this term to provoke thought. And frankly, it was not something that I just pulled out of the air one day. It was actually very thoughtful about this is really the engine of practicality. Okay, how does one subside in this world? There's economic requirement, there's material requirement, and if you aren't individually viable and vital, like you were suggesting, you can't possibly be of as much use as you can to others. So economic was picked, and frankly, one was picked because of the many readings that I've done around Buddhism. You're one with everything, and how we're all interconnected.
You're blowing your business image.
Oh, well, I'll do it. But, I mean, again, we're all interconnected. And as we go on to talk about building a life portfolio, we'll start broadening some of this discussion. But Economic Unit of One was specifically about individual vitality and viability. When you talk about building a life portfolio, we're going to talk about social, we're going to talk about spiritual, we're going to talk about physical, we're going to talk about all those things.
Yeah. I love what you're saying about that. Was a very purposeful decision. The economic part, while it isn't the only thing, we want to keep in touch with that through our series, that when you're true to yourself, the economic part works better too.
Well, and it's interesting, if you look at the people that are making a lot of money today, for the most part, they're very socially conscious. If you look at Bill Gates, if you look at Warren Buffett, I mean, they're going to be giving away the majority of their money. Interestingly enough, if you go back in history, back to the industrial age of J.P. Morgan and Andrew Carnegie and John Rockefeller, they all had a race to who could be the richest guy in the world. And the reality was, once Andrew Carnegie sold his steel company, there became a new race. Who could give the most money away the fastest? Hence, Carnegie starting something like 2,500 libraries across the country. Rockefeller giving away to this day zillions of dollars. So they can go hand in hand. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, we thank you for asking that question. And the one part isn't about isolating. It isn't about selfishness, etc. So.
No, but economics is a system, and you have economics in a myriad of different realms, but the reality is one person has something that another person needs and or wants, and then there's some sort of a transaction that occurs. And that's the message we're trying to get across is, look, we want to be building up an individual skill set and experience that's relevant on an ongoing basis to a marketplace, whether you're an educator or a musician or an artist or a business guy or what have you, because if the economics aren't there, boy, it's tough.
Back to your old quote. It's hard to self-actualize when you can't pay the electricity bill.
It's certainly true.
Okay. We got some comments also on teacher to trainer kinds of things, dependence, etc. You want to?
On the educator?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that one was, I think, the comment was, is the culture, because it's teacher dependent, doesn't perhaps put as much responsibility or burden onto the student themselves, and how do we get it where the student is, I believe, participating as much as the teacher. That's correct, Stacy?
Or the student serves as an educator themselves.
Student serves as an educator. So there's a more of a, for lack of a better word, peer-to-peer relationship where they're helping unleash things in one another. And I probably overused that word, but oh well. And I think that's the wave of the future. I think students are going to be driving just to a large degree. Now, when they're younger, they're going to need, obviously, guidance and direction. But as they progress, we hope to create learning environments where there's some level of carving that's occurring by the student themselves, and that they're creating a roadmap and a GPS system that gets them excited, that gets them energized, that takes them into the worlds that they want to be in, and by the way, that takes them into worlds that may make them a little uncomfortable, because a little discomfort could be good. So I think that's what the educator, and I think the point is, look, the days of just pushing information at the students and there being kind of a, what's the word, hierarchical relationship, I think, are probably gone. But if you look back, when I look back, and I mentioned this in one of the videos, 4 out of the 5 most influential people in my life, outside of my parents, were either educators or coaches. They had that ability. They got you fired up, or they allowed you to get fired up about something you didn't know you were fired up about. And I think that's what the future brings, both for not just for educators, but for parents, anybody in a leadership role. How do you increase that energy around curiosity, creativity, excitement, and development?
Okay. And if you look at the educational world now, you'll see a lot more research, a lot more written on the whole idea of student-centered learning, of student-initiated change, of student as teacher. Even some of the work now on design thinking, et cetera, has a lot of opportunities and just opportunities, lessons, et cetera, where students are asked, what do you need to learn? What way do you best learn it? How can you initiate learning yourself? So I think that's a trend we're seeing more and more in education now, is trying as educators to not treat students as these passive recipients, but even beyond that, to really ask and listen very deeply to what they need. And to me, that's what a good educator does. That's what a good business person does too. Every book, now you're the expert in business, Mark, but every book I've ever read on selling says the best sellers listen more than they talk.
Yeah, and they get people to buy things that they need. They don't sell them anything that they don't need. The best business people go in and they create some level of consultative credibility, which I believe is what an educator does. And once you develop that consultative credibility, you develop trust. When you develop trust, your whole relationship changes. It becomes one where you're feeding off one another, and one is not subordinate to the other. I mean, even in business today, to me, autocratic, authoritative business people aren't going to work. They have to have some authority, they have to have some credibility, they have to have some experiences, they have to build some outstanding trust, and they need to create an environment where employees can flourish. Same thing.
What was the word you just used?
Consultative.
Consultative credibility? Is that the word?
Well, we'll have it on tape so we can play it.
It was exciting. No, I'm not making fun of you. That was a great term. It might be another area that we could explore in another module, another way we translate some of the concepts from business to education, education back to business. Because the teacher needs to have that with their students, just like a business person would with a client.
A parent needs to have that with their children.
Okay. All right.
Parents that allow their children to grow through inner passion and purposeful exploration, and allow them to fail forward, instill confidence to let them know that we're not perfect, and so hence we can't expect them to be perfect. I think is absolutely a critical way. Right? So it's all of these systems: parental, educational, business, not-for-profit, governmental. We've got a huge opportunity in governmental because it's hierarchical. Thank you.
Good.
So
good. All right. So those are some of the themes we came up with. What's our next module coming up, Stacy? They're going to see next.
It's rethinking risk.
Rethinking risk.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Rethinking risk.
Which was interesting because, and I'll say this on here, I noticed that video has already been watched quite a bit. The one with Jeff Ubben, and for those of you who do not know Jeff Ubben runs one of the most successful hedge funds in the country. We brought him on board for a couple reasons. One is he has a real passion for education. He's a key partner in the Posse Foundation and a key supporter. And he runs a hedge fund, which is all about managing risk. And obviously it's about making money for his shareholders and his investors. But he's got a really good way about him and about building value for companies and for people, and by the way, allowing them to make some money along the way.
Good. And as you watch him this week, see if you can make some translations into the educational world, because I think there's a lot of overlap.
Yes.
So thank you for being with us this week. We're enjoying interacting with you. Keep writing us. Keep doing all the things.
Live office hours next week.
Do we have a live? No, the week after next. So we'll do another. If you write us, we will comment on your comments as we have done here next week. And then the week after that, I believe we have live office hours again. So we'll let you know well in advance so more of you can call in and talk to Mark directly. Okay. And
Talk to both of us.
all right. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks, Mark.